Well, welcome everyone to the April 24th Hub88 Tech Talk. I'm Ken Miller, chairman of Hub88. We're here to navigate the next emerging technologies between companies, entrepreneurs, and technology.
It's Apple Care.
First, I'd just like to mention our board of directors that helped me out here. Martha Carney, Annette Kenny, Matt O'Sullivan, and Phil Hoffman. I also would like to thank our sponsors and partners, especially Nokia, for offering their facility for this Tech Talk, and David Zahn for coordinating all the audio-visual here. Appreciate it. And also our sponsors, Ice Miller Law Firm, and Representative Rena's here with us today. J&J are marketing, and West Suburban Angels. Hub88's mission is to ignite the next wave of technology. So we hold these tech talks to provide information on technology to help with that whole process. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator, who will put this together for us. Laurie Swanson, Carol Nunkovic, and Nancy Monroe are on our program team, and they put together this fine panel discussion on cyber security. Laura Swanson is the CEO and founder of Inspire Her tech firm for IT recruitment. His inclusion-focused approach successfully matches the right talent with the right culture. Inspire Her offers initiatives for creating hiring practices for inclusive work environment. And Laurie is also a certified coach focused on women technologists and on strategy and leadership. So please welcome Laurie, and who will introduce the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ken. So yes, so thank you for mentioning that my programs team, but just do a quick stand up. Nancy Monroe, Carol Nunkovic, and so thank you. So just a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll get started with the topic. Let me think here. So first of all, there are, out on that table, there's a number of flyers. Deb put together some tips on cybersecurity. What was it called? Pitfalls to avoid. So pick that up. Down there, Graciela has some, so she'll introduce herself in a second. But I just want to mention that there's a golf outing where she's with Northeastern Illinois University, and they're doing a golf outing to raise funds for their first ever computer science scholarship. Woohoo. So yeah, and then she also has her quarterly magazine up there. So I wanted to make sure. Oh, I have that right here. Yeah, and then there's then I have some things on a program that's for job search. Readiness program that's coming up next month, and some things on diversity, so you can pick those up. And I want to mention also, next month, May 22nd, our Tech Talk is wearable tech. So we're working on the flyer right now. Nancy did a lot of work on that. It's going to be really cool, and we'll get out to the email. If you're not on the email list, there is a sign-up sheet for that out there. And then you'll get the flyer, and we definitely want to invite and keep filling up. We've got a lot of chairs, so we want to fill up this room. And these are all free. So, and then the other thing we have up there as far as the sign-up sheets is if you want to join the programming committee with us, we do these tech talks, and we also do something called STEAM Fest in the fall, which is for women in STEM. And so there'll be, last year was our first one. It was pretty cool. And this year we'll be doing a lot around mentoring and sponsorship. And we don't have it all fleshed out yet. That's why we need people to come and help. You can sign up. We'll reach out to you. The other thing we have here is Tech Talk ideas, topic ideas. So if you have ideas for topics or you know some cool speakers, let us know about them. We'll reach out, talk to them, and see how we might fit them into the calendar that's coming up. So that is basically what I wanted to say from a housekeeping perspective. And now I want to get started on this topic, because I know you guys are here for that reason. So one of the things, so like I said, I knew a little, I'm an IT recruiter, and so I know a little bit about recruiting cybersecurity people. If you know a Linux cybersecurity person, I'm recruiting for that right now. But it's been really interesting to learn about, each of these people here on the panel and the different perspectives that they have when you look at this really enormous problem / topic of cybercrime and securing yourself against potential threats. I wanted to say one thing. So as far as the cost of cybercrime, this is from an Accenture report that just, they completed it over about 15 months ago. But the cost of cybersecurity annually is $11.7 million. It's increasing by 22% a year. So these costs, so this number, since it was over a year ago, is probably quite a bit higher than 11.7 million. The number of security breaches that a company has on average every year is 130, and that's increasing by 27.4%. And finally, the cost of a malware attack is about $2.4 million on average for companies. And it usually takes about 50 days to resolve those attacks. And if it's a ransomware attack, I don't know the cost on that, but those usually take around 23 days to resolve. So imagine, the cost of if you're down because of ransomware and everything that goes along with from loss of revenue to loss of customer trust. I mean, that's why this is so important. So what I'd like to do is have each of the members of the panel introduce themselves and tell you a little bit briefly about their background so you can see and hear about what they're bringing to this conversation today. And we'll start with you, Deb.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here. My name is Deb Reiter. I'm the owner of CMIT Solutions. We're a small business in Batavia, and what we do is we're an outsourced IT services provider for small businesses where it makes no sense for them to have full-time IT. My job is to keep their network running and keep them secure.
Great. Thank you, Michele.
Hi, good afternoon. It's a delight to be here, and I'm Michele Piazza. I'm the principal founder and CXO of MP Global Ventures here in Greater Chicago. I have over 20 years of experience in financial services and then opened my own firm in cybersecurity at the end of 2013. I help businesses assess their cybersecurity maturity and risk hygiene and help them come up with a sustainable, cost-effective plan and help them implement that. Thank you.
And I'm Michael Mantzke, President and CEO of Global Data Sciences. And we are a truly global company. We do work largely in the manufacturing space, operations, data collection and visualization. Cybersecurity is a component of our business, as well as data encryption.
Wonderful. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I imagine everybody's tired coming from jobs, so thank you so much for being here. My name is Graciela Perera, or Grace for short. I'm an associate professor in Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago. I've been teaching and doing research in cybersecurity and networks over 15 years now. I'm part of the Computing Alliance of Hispanic Serving Institutions. They're a group of universities dedicated for student success, specifically for the Hispanic population. And right now I'm very excited to share that we have a partnership through CASI and Google, in which we'll be running a summer program, the Computer and Science Summer Program with Google in July. And I'm very excited because we're going to bring high school students to Northeastern, and then they'll become freshmen, and excited all about technology. Googlers will come in. It's a partnership with industry and academia. We're the only university in the Midwest running this pilot, and hopefully it'll be very successful. I also I'm part of the CompTIA board of diversity and inclusion, and I do a lot of outreach to high schoolers. We'll have a talk in Northeastern with Tecnolochicas. That's an initiative from the National Women Center of Information Technology and Google, trying to promote Latinas in coding. So that's about it. Thank you.
It's wonderful. And can you mention again about your research?
My research is cybersecurity and networking and future generation networking.
The future of
networking. Yeah,
that's so interesting. Okay, great. Just for questions and stuff. So that's really great.
Thank you.
So to set a little context, of course, when we talk about cybersecurity, There is business and corporate, and there's also personal. We were talking about Alexa before we officially got started here, and you know, smart homes and those sorts of things. And for today, we're really focused on the business. So I just want to put that in, but that doesn't mean that you can't ask a question about the home stuff too. You know, and we have smart people over here. I can't answer it, but they. So Deb, you know, you guys all remember Equifax and the big data breach, like probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest data breach that they had and lost all those records. So when I was thinking about this, I wanted to, based on what your company does, can you tell us a little bit about maybe a real life business horror story?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Well, I've been prepared. She asked me this
I did
this
ask
morning
you.
or last night. So I have a large client in Batavia who was not a client at the time when they called me. They do a lot of business overseas, and one of their largest and most significant clients was behind paying on a significant invoice. And when they inquired about it after it was overdue, the client said, well, that's been paid. I transferred the funds. Mm. So what had happened is they received an email, and someone had spoofed the email address for the Batavia business owner and said that, you know, all future invoices should be paid to this new bank and this new account. And because they found out about it late, a bank transfer happened, you know, pretty quickly, and there was absolutely nothing they could do. They could not recover that at all. About a month after that happened, they received information that they were served a lawsuit by a company named Malibu Media. Malibu Media makes adult films, and if you Google Malibu Media lawsuits, you will see there's about 6,000 of them active right now. They're scam artists, but they do it within the law. So what they say is that someone with an IP address at that company had illegally downloaded a film, and they were, so they were suing them to make up for that. And their legal counsel said, you know what, you could take this to court and spend a lot of money, or just settle out of court. And that's what they did.
And they ended up having to settle out of court.
Yeah, they did. So that's just two very small examples of the types of things people are having to deal with. And so as a result, they contacted me and said, we'd like to initiate some type of cybersecurity program. So we looked at what they needed to do, what their current practices were, and they were really good. Within a year's time, I have a summary of the things they've done, but they've really developed what we call a culture of security. So security is foremost in their mind for any change they make, anything they do. They mandated two-factor authentication on all financial accounts, as well as email and anything else that allowed two-factor authentication. And what that is simply, you log into an account online, and then you have usually a code sent to your phone or some other application to actually authenticate you. So they've done that. I really applaud this step they took because it's so important. They took formal training. They installed, and I'm a reseller of this, a formal training program by a company called KnowBe4, and everybody is mandated to take online on-demand training on cybersecurity. Because the people in this audience, I'm guessing we're all smart, and we read about stuff, we know what to look for, but not everybody does that. Not everybody reads the types of things we read or is interested in what we're interested in. Especially if you have a minimum wage employee working at your company, chances are nobody took the time to talk to them about how important it is to be able to not click that link in that email. So that's the type of security training that they did. They created HR policies about appropriate computer usage. They purchased cybersecurity insurance, and that's overlooked a lot of times. Your insurance company, for a pretty reasonable price, will offer you cybersecurity insurance. In the event you get ransomware and have to pay $10,000 to pay the crook, they'll cover that for you. They initiated password improvement policies. They added a business class firewall, and they moved to managed services to keep their network secured. The takeaway I want to leave you with is that prevention is 10% of the cost of remediation. Right. So if you do the right things up front, the events are going to be more of a speed bump than a train wreck. But you have to think about it in advance.
Yeah, it was really interesting when we were talking about this, having her, tell a little story, is that she said that she had talked to this company prior to all of this, and they were thinking about doing something, you know, and I think that a lot of companies are thinking, but there's always this, oh, maybe it'll never happen to us, you know. But in fact, if you are thinking about it, if you're a company or, you know, own a company or, you know, in a position where you could actually impact this sort of change, don't just think about it, do something about it. And the other thing that I thought was interesting is that it's a culture of security. So it isn't just IT that's involved.
It is
HR
not an
was
IT
involved.
problem only.
It's
Yeah.
not an IT problem only.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. HR has to be involved with the policies, and it permeates the whole. The financial department had to think about how they're going to change the way they notify clients about any changes to their accounts. So
Right.
it encompasses the entire organization.
That's good. We have a virus protection. Get to behind on their virus protection. So Michele, I'm going to take one to you. So tell me, what would you say, you know, because you are going in and consulting with financial services, obviously number one, most at risk, you know, company.
Healthcare.
Yeah, healthcare, utilities, and energy and, are the top. And so, but what do you think is keeping the CTO, CIO, CEOs up at night around cybersecurity?
So just to give you a few statistics.
Sure.
Third-party suppliers in all of these organizations, that means you subcontract to your cloud provider, you subcontract to ADP, you subcontract to Salesforce. Attacks on third-party suppliers was up 78% in 2018. So that's a big area to get to know. Know your cloud provider, know your third parties. Ransomware was up 12%. Mobile ransomware was up 33%. Malicious emails is my number one sort of keeping me up at night because 48% of the attachments that come through email are malicious. And now they've started this thing called PowerShell that is a JavaScript that few networks can block. And they come in and they can attack your network and attack your devices. And 1 in every 10 URL is malicious. So those are a couple of things. The other thing is the human element, the security and awareness training, the sharing of passwords, the changing when you install a new device, install a new piece of software. There's always default passwords. Your tech guy's got to be changing that every 30, 60, 90 days, whatever makes sense for your particular organization. There's no you know, blanket, you know, program. The other thing is IoT devices. With the coming of 5G, 5G can directly connect to an IoT device, which surpasses your routers, some of your hubs, your network security, and a lot of those controls. So IoT coming into the business as well as the consumer market is something to keep an eye on. My whole thing is do your basics. Everything is about basics. Are you patching both your firmware, your software, your application security? Email monitoring. If there's a malicious email, isolate it and take care of it. Do you know where your threat vectors are? Like what's the highest threat vector in your particular either financial services, manufacturing, healthcare, and are you keeping the honest people honest?
So so given that, like you said, with 5G and these emerging technologies, is there, I'm really interested in the idea of ethical hackers, as you know, I'm trying to get my son to do that, right? I mean, is that something that companies actually hire an ethical hacker?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the best way. Gamers, the millennial gamers are the best ethical hackers out there. They are, you know, always willing to push the edge. They are very, you know, explorative, and they're very creative. So those are the kind of people you want within your environment. Now you got to keep the honest people honest,
right?
To help you, you know, come up with the best
Sometimes
program.
you don't, you know, you kind of don't know quite when you're crossing the line. That's where communications come in. And
The genre is called penetration testing. So the ethical hackers will actually, you'll engage them, and you'll give them permission to try and break into your network.
Conferences here in Chicago.
Sorry?
Hackathon cybersecurity conference for penetration testing.
Yeah.
That's been around. That's been around a while. There are
Stockholm.
hackers for hire, but their job is to find find your vulnerabilities and identify them for you so you can close them up.
Does the school like have a degree or?
So we do, at Northeastern Illinois, we do have a cybersecurity concentration, an IT concentration. Some of my students participated in ThoughtCon, which is a cybersecurity hackathon.
Here in Chicago called ThoughtCon?
ThoughtCon, yeah, they're from the, they're very good.
That'd be fun to go to.
Yes. It's usually in spring, if I remember correctly, but you have to buy your tickets if you have your kids, or if you want to go, you have to buy your tickets pretty early. It gets booked out.
Okay.
And the location is usually kept secret.
Oh,
So
oh
it's
my
next week.
God.
There you go.
There you go.
Where is it?
Free advertising.
There you go.
Really? That's very unusual.
Oh,
No
I know
wonder.
where that is. I used to live there.
Oh my God.
And then
That's
the
great.
last thing that I wanted to mention
Yes.
was form jacking. For anyone that does processes credit card payments online, whether you're a retailer or any other business, form jacking is the #1 hot way to go that these cyber criminals are making a lot of money. They literally scrape the checkout page of your website, and $45 for each credit card they can turn in. 10 million credit cards times $45. Your hacker is making a lot of money off of you.
Yeah, traveling the world on that. So Michael, I'm curious. So we've mentioned a little bit about ransomware and so in your, again, your travels and working with your clients, what are some of their, because he does a lot with manufacturers, so what are probably the top security challenges that they're facing, and do you have any, I know you do because we talked a little bit about this too, any interesting ransomware story that you can share?
Without giving too much away, okay.
Right.
I've got a client that I'm affiliated with that had 5 of their manufacturing facilities shut down due to ransomware. And they were not in this country, but you know, at the crux of it were a series of bots that have been planted well ahead
So
of time.
the bots are what caused?
And so in essence, what they did is they grew and learned a few things and passed that information on outside the network. And in this particular area, there were so many layers of IT and relationships, some cross over, some don't, that it was missed. And one glorious day, 5 facilities went completely offline. They couldn't make any product, they couldn't ship any product, they couldn't take in any raw goods and materials unless they paid a ransom in Bitcoin.
In Bitcoin, of course, so it's not, can't track it.
Right, okay. They did not pay the ransom in Bitcoin, okay. They reached out to folks, including us, and you know, we were able to help them get things back online rather quickly. But you know, it caused a very major disruption within that industry. So, you know, the manufacturing side is something that's very vulnerable. When you have machine controls that are running, you know, some are unchecked, some are old, you know, depending on the environment that you're working in. We've encountered systems that date back to 1998, which is, you know, scary. Okay, but and what we do is we bring that to everybody's attention, and depending on who the audience is, you know, and the culture, they'll take heed and make the changes that they need to make. There is, I do want to talk just briefly about the penetration testing piece. Okay, this is how simple it is. That is an area that I actually do work in, and I was pinged by a group to penetrate the security at a energy facility. And now this was a few years back, and all I needed to do was get to the parking lot. That's all they had asked me to do. I drove around the facility to get the lay of the land, found an open construction gate, drove in, through it. Nobody challenged me.
So this is like a physical penetration.
Yeah.
It isn't necessarily
No, this
electronic.
was physical penetration.
Oh, I didn't even
Oh, I
think
thought
about
you
it.
were talking about
And
that.
so I, you know, so I drove, you know, around the inside of this facility, wound up in the parking lot, and I did have a get out of jail free card in case I needed it, right? Got out of my car, took some photographs just to make sure, you know, I had covered, you know, what I was supposed to do, and then I decided to walk over to the entrance, which was secured. And as I walked up to the entrance to the building, there was a crew coming out because shifts were changing, held the door open for me. Now, I had no ID or anything.
Tailgating,
And it's like, oh, hey, you know, and I said, you know what, I left my ID back in my car.
Yeah.
So I, you know, walked back to my car, got in, and as the shift was changing, I simply drove out with everybody else. Now, here's the key. security is supposed to check every single car that goes in and out.
Right.
And I drove by and the guard waved at me and I waved back at the guard and that was it. Okay. So that is one example of, basically using a little bit of, social engineering, if you will, apply that to, the right situation. And you can get a lot of information very quickly. We've done the same thing in the medical space where, people suspect that, at the institution, maybe they've got a problem or, things are a little lax. And we'll test that out, and sure enough. Now, depending on and you've probably seen this yourself, depending on the institution, they either take that very seriously or they just check a box and go, yeah, we checked that. So.
Yeah, and the other part of physical security is this whole active shooter craze that's going on in our unfortunate nation here. And, between, tailgating and, coming in as a foreigner or active shooters or someone carrying some kind of explosive device, that's all part of your incident response plan, and you should have a plan that if any of those three things happen, the right person needs to be called, only the right person speaks to the media, only the right people are engaged, and it's discussed. So if you don't have an incident response plan as part of your disaster recovery, that's, something you should look into.
Back to the ransomware thing though, real quick. Okay, in this particular case, the company put all kinds of resources into taking care of the problem and making it go away.
Costs a lot of money,
Right.
like whatever her percentage was,
Yeah,
a lot more than prevention
internally,
would have.
I mean, they did take care of the problem, okay? But you know what, there are a lot of other organizations that would just scratch their heads, pay the money,
Right.
and make the problem go away. Okay?
After-
But
after.
that leaves them, wide open to another problem. down
Very
the road.
vulnerable, I know, it really does. So, Michele, are there like government agencies or what, because you do a lot with compliance, especially in financial services, but beyond that, are,
Well, the first thing is if they have their data classified, what's their crown jewels, and this ransomware took the crown jewels, then your response is very different than if it's,
Not quite as
something at a
important.
lower tier. And I don't want to say none of your data is, sensitive or important, but there's tiers and you should go through that process and understand that. You should always work with the FBI or your local CIA agency, InfraGard. I mean, and that's part of your incident response. Who do I call first? Who gets talked to? And usually for cybersecurity insurance, if the wrong person is spoke to or the process isn't followed, you can actually breach your policy by doing something or not doing something.
Often calling the insurance company is the first thing you should do.
Yeah,
believe it or not.
right. And then, there's a whole media thing within, especially if you're global, GDPR, you have to notify people within 72 hours that you've had a breach, but you have to make sure you've been breached. What if it was like someone just playing around? There really wasn't anything taken. And especially with manufacturing, is it IP, intellectual property? Is it a setting on a control unit? Is it the secret sauce? Someone just took the Garrett's popcorn secret sauce here in Chicago.
that is sacrilege.
And she's saying she deleted everything. Well, to me, I was so upset.
That's a crown jewel for
That is
sure.
the crown jewel for them.
sure.
And, why it wasn't secured, who had access to it. And then, the whole access control goes into your privileged access. What are your crown jewels? Who has access to it? It's a need-to-know basis, and it's the least privilege. You give the least amount of privilege and access to your very, very sensitive data. But that's all part of your governance, your risk, and your compliance. So when I look at, our environment, it's security, risk and compliance, and technology, and all those three things have to work together.
I have two comments to add here is, for my clients, I tell them, even manufacturers have secret sauce. They have a recipe, and they're developed by the founder a long time ago. My advice is don't ever put that into digital form, because if it's in digital form, it's vulnerable. Keep it in a safe, write it down, keep it in a safe. I think that's the first thing you have to realize is that if it's digital, it is probably out there and accessible.
I was wondering how afraid we should be of the cloud.
Yes, be very afraid.
And I would not,
afraid.
I would not put my secret sauce in with a cloud provider. There's probably the next tier and the next tier totally, unless you are absolutely sure who that cloud provider is, but there were 76 million records leaked from the AWS S3, which is the simple storage solution, 76 million. Multiply that by the average cost of a record, which ranges between $141 and $241, and look at the exposure and the expense by the corporations that those records were leaked from. It's exhausting.
I would add, oh.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I would add too that, one of the concerns is the intermediaries that you have from, to get data from point A to point B, okay? It's not necessarily going directly to,
So you're
AWS.
talking about, you have this vendor here, and then maybe, is that what you
Well,
mean?
yeah, I
Third
mean,
party?
The
even
whole
with your-
supply
The
chain.
whole
Yeah,
chain.
even with your cell phone.
Yeah.
Okay, when you send a message through, your cell phone
Okay.
provider, it may make multiple hops before it gets to, where it needs to be. That's a problem. Blockchain, okay, which
Right.
I think is a fantastic emerging technology, still has a way to go. And one of the problems with that is there's still this dependency on intermediaries. Well, that's fine, but if you look at the cost of Bitcoin over the last 18 months, that's the result of there's a lot of intermediaries out there, and the hacks can find the right way in if a particular intermediary does not have their act together. You can't control that. And
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that on our
Right.
call, the idea of you might have a provider here, but you don't know who they're subcontracting to.
Right.
And you might have put them through all the paces and everything's great, but then they subcontract and they're,
Yeah, knowing every part of your third-party supply chain is very relevant.
asking
and-
questions.
And ask those questions, and if you know where your crown jewels are, and the second tier, encrypt it. Encrypt it at data at rest, encrypt it data in transit. Those are like some of the basics. You don't have to encrypt everything, because encrypting everything is very expensive, but encryption is getting cheaper and cheaper, storage is cheaper and cheaper.
Right.
But that's, one,
What about you, Graciela, in your research, because it's this, sort of future of networks and especially applied security and wireless solutions, and what are you seeing as far as cyber threat trends that are maybe increasing, or do you have any response to that?
So my research with future networks comes from testbeds. So I've been part of a community called Global Network Innovations Network called Genie. And what they're trying to do there is that they're very aware, about 10 years ago, in which I joined the community, they were very aware that a lot of the security issues needed infrastructure and needed a testbed to test solutions and experiments. So they started back in 2016, and they started investigating what's called software-defined networking. So Genie was one of the first networks where software-defined networking was created.
Software-defined networking.
So what software-defined networking was trying to attack was that it was very difficult to manage large networks because you had to go into each device, or you had to particularly go to each network and do monitoring. So it was trying to find a solution, because a lot of the incidents that happen are usually configuration problems.
Yeah.
So it was trying to help the network administrators and network folks how to better manage the network. So with the advance of software-defined networking, finally around the year 2012, it got to the market. But it actually was started in academia by many of my colleagues who I know and go to the conference with. So, and they also have test beds, of course, in wireless.
Yeah.
So saying that when cloud came about, right, there's that also we have tried software-defined networking. Google is one of the precursors of using that in their own network. AT&T now is coming into the game a couple of years ago. So how do we better secure that? Now we have cloud. They're talking about points of exchange, software-defined point of exchange where the networks meet too, because there's points where all networks share infrastructure, and then from there they either the traffic flows locally or globally. Because if you're in Chicago, right, it doesn't make sense for the network to go to California and back to Chicago if you're sending an email between, for example, me and Nokia right here. So there's a lot of, like they were saying, they look at it from the supply chain. I look at not a supply chain, but from the network path or the network chain.
Got it.
And there's many things going on with cloud computing, with edge computing, with now clouds at the edge that we're trying. There's a lot of research going on in that field, also with wireless. And you need a test bed because a lot of the theoretical solutions are very good. They're proven by math, and we have theorems. But when you come down to the practice, there are operational problems. There's people's problems. How do you train people in software-defined networking?
Right.
How do you, all the workforce that's right now in IT and in cybersecurity, how do you make them move forward to the next step? It's a large number. So those are kind of the problems that I'm trying to address, especially how do you get that new emerging tech in the hands of regular people? Like I teach at Northeastern, and my students are first-generation students, low income. They never had exposure to technology. And I think part of making new solutions and innovations comes from bringing to the table people with a diverse background and that may not necessarily have been aware to, right? We have good institutions that take care of our good talent, but also smaller institutions like mine and other universities that are not normally at the table should also include their
Absolutely.
students.
Well, they think differently, they see things differently,
Yeah.
and they're going to see solutions that we may never have conceived of in our, I think that's a really good point. And just a plug for Hub88 is the fact that not only do we have a 5G communications lab that recently opened up so you can test your products, but that we have a tie to education because we really do believe the future is you know, you talk about innovation in starting in the schools and then coming into the business side of things.
And not only in the university, we have to start really early. We have to be thinking about kindergarten.
Right. Well, we do
So,
that too. We have robotics camps coming up at NIU. Please sign up. Sign up
As
while you're
early as we can.
right.
But the whole, and I don't want to call it pipeline because pipeline leads people out. So what we're calling it right now in the community is more pathways, because then you can come in and out. So maybe you go out, get a job, then you realize you need more training, you come back, and then you go out again.
That's absolutely.
And
I
you're
see that
spot
as a
on.
recruiter too.
Excuse me,
Go ahead.
on the configurations, because they said the number one hack into cloud providers was through their network misconfigurations.
We're all humans, right?
Yeah.
Who is not human here and has never made a mistake? I want to hire you.
Right. So what I want to do now is open it up to the audience. I'm going to say their names again because if you're like me, I have names kind of go over my head. And so if you have a particular question, you can ask them directly, or if you want to ask the panel, of course, ask the panel. Carol and Nancy have microphones. Deb, Michele, Michael, Grace. Oh, there they are. They're right there.
So I have a question right off the bat.
Oh, good.
As far as emerging tech goes, drones and, I don't know, what's more emerging tech? What,
AI, machine learning.
yeah,
AI,
is our technology exceeding our ability to protect ourselves and our technology?
I'd say yes. I think our technology is way ahead of even our ethics on some of the topics. I look at all these threats. You know, IoT is wonderful, AI is wonderful, but I look at it from the perspective of how can I protect my clients? How can I advise them? And you know, some of those tools just don't exist because the technology is so new.
I think we as a security community need to quickly accelerate our products to be simpler, integrated, and streamlined, and not be so difficult to implement from a security perspective. We are implementing mediocre security right now, and the devices, the nefarious guys are all way, way, way ahead of us. And I think we have to quickly act as a community to accelerate the sophistication, but also, sophisticate to defend, but simpler to install. Because half the time it's like, setting up a scene, which basically brings all your log information together. I mean, it's so difficult. People end up abandoning it just because of the difficulty.
Well, why would they? What would motivate them before an incident? Are there, to be as interested and excited about it as a hacker is?
I think right now it's education and simplicity and cost to install. I think some of these solutions are so expensive that when they look at the budget, they're like, instead of doing a complete end-to-end strategy, they do one thing. Well, we're going to improve our patching and security and awareness training, email monitoring, and and phishing, and all the other components just for the basics are sort of, okay, we'll do that next year.
Later,
Yeah.
right, exactly. Okay,
You know,
great.
and I would add too,
Yeah.
okay, at the C-suite level, a lot of them don't understand it. I mean,
They probably are, you know, like sort of,
just, and, you know, if I had $1 for every time, and I'm not downplaying the role of IT at all, okay, but if I had $1 for every time I heard, well, we're gonna hand that off to the IT guys. Well, then you say, okay, what is their area of expertise? You know, what, you know.
they don't see it as a strategic.
Yeah, they do not. They see it as a utility function,
Right.
not a strategic function.
Yeah,
Right.
got it. And it could be super, super strategic, and in fact, you could sell that to your customers.
Yes, you could. And then, you know, on the other side too, you know, to address the question about, you know, innovation and the acceleration of it, you know, it used to be, you know, back in the day, you know, things might take 2 years to actually make happen. And then a few years ago, that was compressed to 18 months. Now
Oh, yeah,
it's down
there's
to
a
less than 9.
Yeah.
And the problem is within, I'll bet you, within 3 months, somebody's going to come out with a new buzz phrase or a new piece of technology that maybe utilizes some old stuff. And everybody's going to become enamored with that and go, oh my Lord, we have to have that, okay? And they're ignoring the, you know, the rest of it. Okay?
Right,
How it all
of
really
all
comes
the,
together.
what you need to be thinking about. That's
Yeah.
good.
And I think just partnering with the business is so important because that helps the education, that gets you the seat at the table, that helps you get
Right.
into the board meetings, the C-suite meetings. If you, security, IT in the business and operations, if you're in more of a manufacturing environment, everybody should be in on the solutions, the directions, and after all, the business is writing the check usually.
Yep.
IT doesn't have its own budget, security doesn't have its own budget, so you partner with, you know, your
Or IT has to figure out a way to sell that and get
Yeah.
budget approval
Yeah.
for things like that.
Well,
Okay.
go ahead.
Let's go out
I've
and
got a
answer
question.
some more questions. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I like the idea about insurance. I didn't hear about that before. I don't know if anybody saw the program on 60 Minutes about cybersecurity that was just on.
I just heard about it.
Yeah, it's unreal what Russia's doing. It's a statewide sanctioned
Right.
activity, and as we know, it's a big problem with IP in China also. But it's gone to the nth degree with Russia, and the CIA actually went to Russia and said, "We got this hacker that's here." They identified them and said, "Can you help get them for us?" And they hired them. So they used that hacker, and there's been another investigation, a different hacker, that's been going on for 10 years until they finally got there. They created a honeypot. They tracked them and yeah, they traced. So can you guys say more about honeypots and how you trace down
Well,
people?
What's a honeypot?
Go ahead.
I can tell you about that. So you're creating a machine that's enticing hackers to come into it. So it looks like it has really good data.
Yeah.
And what they're doing is they're seeing how they react to it. There was a case even in China where they were able to turn on their cameras, and they saw that the Chinese would come in every day like a regular job and take breaks and their lunch and play games and whatever, and they were seeing how their abilities were to get into other networks and all that stuff. They were investigating them of their tactics of how they're going after stuff.
There's a reason why the Russian company tries to hack a 4-person, very small company or an excavating company. I was just at a manufacturing digital forum with a colleague that is here, Ray, and they showed this example of a small excavating company, just mom and pop kind of shop, but through their supply chain, they were working on U.S. government contracts, and they hacked through every single one of them, even though this excavating company had nothing. Concrete. Why do you want to hack concrete? But that's why Russia's doing that.
Yeah, they created a spear phishing.
Yep.
Again, they were working. The people on the other end said, hey, you send an email, ask them.
Right.
Got that call like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
Right. He was just for the people that are online.
And I would add that the people doing the hacks are not even experts, because what Michael said, you know, right now the technology pieces sometimes are out there and they're easy to use for some people.
Yeah.
And it's very easy.
You just launch
Oh,
them.
Phishing
you don't have to go through
is
an
an
extensive
email that
training
goes out
to
to everybody,
do
and spear phishing is targeted to So you can go to LinkedIn and see what their people's credentials are and then target those people.
Well, I would also, just as kind of a refresh, the Target hack, right? The story behind that was.
Oh, Target, yes.
Yeah, Target department
Yes,
store.
yes, yes.
Yeah, they got in through an HVAC service provider.
Third-party supplier.
Yeah,
Right.
third-party supplier, and
So the small
unfortunately.
company, I've always thought to myself, oh, no one will ever hack
No,
me.
they
What's
want
the-
you now.
they-
That's
what's the- but they're
Well,
on
and
there,
the sad part about that whole story is on the Target side, okay, the small HVAC company should not have had access to
Yeah,
the
what they
third-party
did,
network
yes.
that they did. So, there were two problems with that. But, in essence, the hackers found the weakest link to get in, and they got in.
That's a great case for our security risk assessment. A lot of companies don't understand where their crown jewels were. I like that
Yep.
term. I think I'd like to use it.
Yeah.
Where
go ahead.
they don't know. They don't know where they are. They don't stop and think about who has access to it. How can I control it? And there's just conversations that need to be had.
Great, let's give the audience another chance.
I've got a question from Corley.
Where are you?
Yeah,
There you are.
with all the companies that's out there, big companies, Target, Home Depot, Equifax, we talk a lot about them. Now, these are big companies. You would think they would actually come and have these things set up. And especially in the Target, I'm familiar with that one, where the HVAC company came in, and they were in for like 3 months before Target even, who has an IT staff, knew about it. So what are we doing? I'm concerned about the hesitancy of large companies. Small companies, I can say, you give me the budget thing. But the large companies that's getting hacked, what type of solutions are we providing to them and talking to them? Because there's some dangerous stuff that you can look on the web and see large companies that's still using the default passwords
Right.
for their
Michael,
equipment.
you want to answer to that?
No, I was just
No.
going to
No,
say,
he doesn't.
and this is to Michelle's point as well as the one that I was making earlier, that in large organizations, there may be so many layers and handoffs and between, various aspects of IT, okay? The folks that run ERP versus the folks that run the network versus the folks that run email versus, right? And
So everything's very siloed.
everything is segmented.
Yeah.
And the problem is yes, eventually it does roll up to the top, okay? But unless there's a really significant effort to make everybody aware, the guys at the top, that A, they're in charge, B, they're accountable. And, when we look at the Equifax breach, okay, at the end of the day, those folks were accountable. Were they held accountable? Not really.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
the
Like a
second part of
layman's
that question.
Yeah.
What about the accountability? How can we hold these big companies accountable? They've got all my personal data.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Yeah, great.
There are regulatory agencies for medical, the HIPAA,
Right.
HIPAA compliance, and the financial world has them as well.
Yeah.
We haven't yet seen them
FINRA.
permeate into the other industries, and I'm forecasting that will happen.
Yeah, and big companies have big problems. So through the exposure I had to high-tech companies a little bit and smaller businesses, what are the problems? It's basically, it's a big problem. So what are the skills that you need your people to be updated on? Communication, critical thinking, and cooperation and collaboration. So a lot of companies have to keep information channels separate. How do you know who to talk to? I've seen people in the defense work next to each other, and they go like, I can't have lunch with you because I'm in this research project, and you're in that one, and we can't talk to each other because we're under, under non-disclosure agreement.
Right, exactly.
So it's that culture of trust
Yeah.
and keeping people honest, like
You're
Michele
honest,
said.
people honest.
It's not only the technology and the solutions and the layers, it's also how you bring up the people to speed with all these attacks and all these layers of complexity.
Got it. So it all boils down to privacy. So when they implemented GDPR in Europe,
Mm-hmm.
in my humble opinion, forecast, by 2020, there would be some state-by-state or federal implementation of privacy laws. You have California that implemented it last year. Ohio just implemented it like a month or two ago. state by state. I'd rather see a federal program, so then we have some frameworks and some guidance. But slowly, each state, so to protect your data, your credit card data, PCI, if someone is processing transactions on their website and your data is hacked, you have remediation against your.
We have about like 5 more minutes, so definitely.
So I do incident response work as an attorney, and so this is
That's
a really
great.
great panel. I had a couple questions, 2 specific things where we're seeing a lot of exposure, and it's sort of a repeat issue is, and I think, Michael, you mentioned legacy systems, legacy data systems, especially with mergers and acquisitions, when you have a decentralized company that buys up other companies and they don't know where their data is. They might have policies that are in place relating to data retention, but they're not implementing them. And that's a challenge. I'm not sure sort of how to best, often when it comes to me, it's too late anyway, but we're just dealing with the fallout and regulators and things like that. But that's a challenge. I'm wondering how you deal with that. And then the other challenge is that a lot of times there's a disconnect where the business folks assume that IT is doing X, Y, and Z, and we have these audits and but the audit is, too sensitive, so IT just turns it off because they don't want to have to deal with it, and they're getting all these false positives or false negatives.
False negatives.
So how do you deal with those 2 sort of cultural issues in corporations?
So working with a couple of PE firms now, the M&As keep happening, and all of a sudden the holding company looks and goes, what is my risk? What do I have? So go in, do an assessment, whether it's a high level or using an industry framework. And now NIST has adopted a RMF, which is a risk management framework. So you can, combine all of these and get a really good feel for where their gaps are, where they have nothing, where they have something, but they just don't test it. But you have to look at each individual company within that holding company. So once you get a flavor of that, then you can, either implement and say, okay, everybody needs a pen and vulnerability test. Everybody needs disaster recovery and incident response, and it needs to be tested. And, here's the cycle that makes sense for that particular portfolio company. What was your second question? I'm sorry, I spaced that out. Oh, the audit, yes.
And then the disconnect where everybody else is doing like, got it, and I keep like, well, you don't want to do, this thing keeps thinking,
So that's all identity access management programs. Right. So by your role as a security, architect, you have the responsibility to monitor this, this, and this. And there's reports that come out to say you turned this alert off, or you didn't, monitor the logs from the router or the hub or, certain parts of your network. So it's all identity access management. You can do it at a very detailed level. Most programs never get fully implemented because people get caught up in the minutia, but you can put at least a basic scale in, and you work with HR because it's all role-based, right? And then you can track it.
It's a big problem.
Yeah.
It's a big problem, and I think it's a new problem too, or at least it's new in that it's now on people's conscious effort.
Which is good.
So it's just, I think the solutions are yet to be had because they are so complex right now. Even a security risk assessment, depending upon what your company does, that's a huge undertaking just to understand what's going on in your business. So it's a new problem that needs solutions.
And you should never be afraid to push back. Okay, if somebody tells you that, this is the way it is, for example, and you feel that it's not correct, or maybe there's a challenge there, no one should be afraid to push back.
Well, and that's that business getting,
alignment.
The C-level not really feeling like I don't get IT.
Right.
And so then but instinctually, they feel like something's happening and they don't push back. So, yeah. So we have, I guess I'll just.
Do you have any questions from the phone?
Oh, yeah, that's right. David, is there any WebEx? We have WebExers on there.
Yeah, I have one question. Can you hear me?
Open up the audience here, so I'll unmute you, and anybody has a question, feel free.
Yeah, I have one question. Can you hear me? Hello?
Ken. Alexa.
Personally,
How scared should we be?
Personally, should we be using things like Alexis?
It's inevitable. The amount of IoT devices has exploded and will continue to explode as we become more and more, dependent upon them. Personally, I found out, or they admitted that they were doing active listening. Before they said you had to say Alexa, right, and then it would engage the listening, but they found out it was listening all the time. So, until they sort of improve that interface,
And they actually, again, have some laws for, the protection of privacy things.
Well, interesting about the Internet of Things devices like Alexa, like your Nest thermostat, they're not intelligent enough to put an antivirus on them or to put any controls on there. I think if IoT devices became more intelligent, we could have more of an operating system-ish controls over them. They'd probably be safer than they are today.
Yeah, so just like the old-fashioned, surge protectors used to plug your devices into, it would know if it had an electrical surge in your home. The IoT device has, that kind of sensing, that if it had some kind of surge that was inappropriate, or maybe there's a set of rules that's implemented, it would be more intelligent and
It's the lack of intelligence.
Yeah, I would plug it in then.
So as our final question, if there was one thing you were going to tell, businesses to do this year, what is one thing you would suggest that you must do this?
Oh my God, I have 10.
I know. So, one or two. Graciela, great.
I'll start. Well, because I represent the education, think about training. How are you training your people and the professional development that you need? None of that's a lot of cost. There's a lot of cost on professional development. So who should be your partners? Should be a community college or university, another company doing training. There would be certifications, maybe online. So thinking about not only buying new tech, but also think about your people and how to better prepare them. Because
knowledge is power. Knowledge is power, and training them and making them, because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, the human element.
Right, exactly. Michael, what would you
I would say accountability.
Okay, tell me more.
Accountability, big time. Okay, so if you're a C-suite person, you should do what you need to either get educated or at least invite the right people in to point out to you just upfront what the risks are for not having these things under control. Okay. The second piece of that would be within your own organization. Okay, if you have issues or problems that need to be managed, get them managed. Because at the end of the day, if you wait, you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And outside of all that, though, the legal system we have itself, and there are plenty of statutes, and you mentioned HIPAA, and you're in the FINRA space and the whole nine yards, okay? And you sit back and you go, okay, these are all great, but unless the legal system actually begins to, I'll say it, prosecute or hold accountable people that are screwing up, what good?
Many of them.
Yeah. What good is it? What good is it?
Work forever.
So just.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Michele.
All right. I would say third-party supplier assessments. Overall, a security risk assessment. So you can't measure what you don't know. So having an assessment, although it is a 3-month process, you can pinpoint where your gaps are and where you need to remediate. You don't have an endless budget, but at least you can prioritize. And then definitely board education. And we can all help with that, prepare the reports, come in and do some education. But if your C-suite, which, writes the check for every single tool, education, know-befores, cloud providers, if they don't know what the check's going for, and they don't know you're at least, addressing the basics, you're never going to get any money.
Thank you.
I've got a chat question from Han, sorry.
Okay,
I've got to
great.
jump in.
Tell us.
He says it seems to him that the IoT vendors don't have a strong incentive to make their products secure. Is that correct?
I would say yes. Because it would add cost.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we don't want to pay more. That's on us.
And right now, with IoT, it's early adoption, right? The latest and greatest, the fanciest, camera on the outside of your door, the best, device that you can possibly get. you know,
And it will change in 3 months. I
it
think.
will, right, yeah.
And it's all about keeping that secret private. So I'm not gonna open it up to other people to
Right.
see and get a critique or get an improvement, because that could be the edge of my business towards selling it.
Which is why, you know, I think we talked about a 5-year plan. I personally don't believe in anything beyond 2 to 3 years, because things change, your environment change, you adopt security as a culture, your board gets more educated. You know, 2 to 3 year plan, if you can live out a 2-year plan and actually implement it,
Right.
that makes the
That's,
most sense.
after listening to you, that's why I went from the 5-year to the 1 year.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, it
Yeah.
sounds like there's stuff we gotta do
Right.
right now, and it changes so much that you need to continue to stay on top of it and make it part of your process.
Right, and there's not, you know, infinite budgets.
Right. Deb, one more thing you'd like to add before we
Yes.
close?
I would like to say that the one thing you really need to give some consideration to is developing a business continuity plan. Because no matter who you talk to, all the thought leaders in cybersecurity space will say the same thing. It's not a question of if you're going to be breached. It's a question of when. So have a plan. Know how you're going to continue your business after something happens.
That's wonderful. So everyone, please give them a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And do you have a few minutes to stay and talk to the crowd and come to you? Okay,
I don't
that's
have
wonderful.
any handouts, but I do have business cards, so.
Right, and then again, there's handouts up at the table and business cards, Michael, they're all up there. So please get them. Go ahead, Ken.
Ken?
Wrap us
On
up.
behalf of Hub88, thank you very much for coming. And if you want to stay in touch, you can email to hello@hub88.org and make sure that you're on the mailing list, or if you have any questions, don't know how to reach someone, we'll help you out. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
You turn off your mic.